happening here is this is a tension, like a stitch size. This is your tension. There's adjustments for tension. This is your stitch size. So on a standard machine, it's kind of happy 7, 8, 9, around those higher numbers. On a bulky machine, it's happier like 3, 4, 5, those kind of numbers. So when you're just doing regular swatches, just keep it at kind of a bigger stitch size, like 8 or 9 for a standard, because the yarn for the standard is kind of the thickest that you want, so put it on a bigger stitch size, if that makes sense. The bulky is about the same if you were to do if you're only to knit on every other needle on a standard. You can't put as thick of yarn in there because the hooks aren't as big, but that's about the same size because it's 4.5 millimeter, 9 millimeters, so it's just doubled. So every other one, sometimes you can get away with knitting on a little bit bigger yarn on every other one. So you just have to try. But anyway, so what's happening here is you should have this little guy clicks that thing every time. It's annoying if you don't want to count your rows, so make sure it's up, unless you do want to count your rows. So this is just a really general, like, if you slide the numbers backwards, you know, it goes backwards or forwards. You have to put it down to 0. 0. Now it's on 0, 0, 0. This is how I'd want to start my rows. This only matters when you're actually doing a pattern or a swatch that you're like, I need to do 40 rows. So you want to count your rows, put that down, and every time I swipe past it, it's going to count my rows for me. This is going to drive me nuts. I'm going to have to fix this. But for right now, you don't really need to count your rows. And then if you mess up and need to go back, you just manually move this thing backwards and forwards it's just super easy. This is normal knitting. You want this on the end side. H is hold, so that means it's a thing I'll show you later, but it means if there's needles out and I have it on H, it's not gonna knit on those needles and it'll fall off if you're wanting to knit on those needles. If I have it in N, the easiest way to line things up is just push them out, make sure it's on N, knit past, and now it's all lined up. You've got the A position, and these can be denoted in different letters, doesn't matter. This back position is upper working position. It's not, or non-working, I'm sorry, it's out of commission. So you're not gonna be knitting on these. This B position, and sometimes you can feel a little bit of a catch where these positions are. This B position is the normal working position. D position is for when you're doing a pattern. This is also an upper working position, so it's like you have working, upper working. It's when you have like a ferrule or pattern or something, you're gonna have needles in different spots. Normal knitting, they're just gonna be in B. E is hold, so when you push it out to E and you don't have it on hold, it's gonna push them back into working. So if you know you wanna just like put a bunch of needles into working, just push them out, make sure it's an N, run past it, and then it'll line them up. Don't have yarn in your carriage though. This little button is just a release for these. These are tuck, slip stitch, and multicolor, so ferrule. And if I push one of these buttons in and I need to release it, I just release it like that. So tuck, you can do one direction, both directions. We'll get into those. Those are for the punch cards. This is where your punch card goes. I will show that to you, but not right this minute. This is only for punch cards. And then KC is what you'd use for punch card. SM is single motif, so that's what these little pink things and green things are for. CR is carriage release. So if you get stuck and you can't move it either way, you go to CR and then you can kind of wiggle it off and pull it off like that. But you want to put it, the easiest way to, it's kind of difficult to put it, technically you can put it on this way. I think it's much easier to put it back on normal knitting and slide it in, and then you can kind of make sure it's working right before. You have to go past all of the needles before you can go the other direction. So if I go only halfway and I try to go back the other way, I can't. It won't let me until I fully knit the row. It doesn't need to come all the way up here, and be careful it doesn't like fly off. These are extension rods, so if you wanted to knit the whole needle bed, they only are on a standard, unfortunately, but if you want to knit the whole needle bed, you put extension rods in, and then it has something to hold it over here so it doesn't fly off. But for what we're gonna do for the beginning, you're only really gonna be working on the middle part of the machine. Your needles, it starts at 0, goes to 100 this way, or whatever it is on the bulky, and it goes to 100 this way. That's so that you are centering it, and then you're counting needles out this way and this way. So if I've got 20 on each side, that means I have 40 needles, obviously, 20 and 20. So that the reason that we do that is so that you can have a right side and a left side, because sometimes something will be happening on one side of the pattern but not on the other. So you can say, okay, on the right side I decrease 1 or whatever, and you can keep track of your needles that way. For right now, it doesn't matter how many needles, and it doesn't matter about centering it, just push needles out. I'm only gonna do a little bit because and I would recommend you kind of do the same, just start with a little chunk, because the more you do, the longer it's gonna take to do the cast on. If these are kind of like this, it's gonna think that it's gonna kick it into working. So you wanna make sure the needles that you don't wanna use are all the way back. And all the needles have these little latches on them. Sometimes you need those latches back, sometimes you need them forward, but just be aware that they have these little latches, they're delicate, and they get bent really easily, or they get kind of pushed under the hook of the needle. If that happens, you have to replace your needle. So I will show you how to replace a needle. We need to order more standard. We're actually out of standard, but we have extra bulkies. If we ever run out of needles, which hopefully won't happen, you can always take one from the end and put it in, so you're not gonna be using these really for the most part. So if I broke a needle and I didn't have an extra one, I could take out number 100 and put it in where the broken one is. Because if it's broken and it's in the middle, you can't use the machine until it gets replaced, or it'll leave a big hole in it. And then these are your brushes. So on standard, it's really easy, just flip them down and flip them up. On the bulky, you actually have to put them in and screw them in. That's why there's an R and an L and the little screws. So you actually have to put them in. So there's a weaving cast on, which I'll show you after this first one. And it's really easy on this one because I just flip them up and flip them down. So I'll probably do that almost all the time when I'm just like throwing yarn on to show you something. But on a bulky, you'll find a different one that you like better, because that one isn't as easy on the bulky. And then this one could have could have letters on it, or could have these characters on it, but there's 2 different positions. This is where your yarn goes. So there's a position in the back, and when you close it, there's another position in the front. That's for another color. What you're going to use almost all the time is that position in the back. So this is open, that's closed. When it's open, you put your yarn in, and there is again, up there, you feel like a little click. You want that. You'll feel a little click in the back, and it's like loose and free in here. I actually forgot to get clothespins. And then when you close it, it should be kind of free in here. If I had a second color, I would have the first color back there, and then the second color just slides in with a little couple clicks there into the second position. But I'll show you that later when we do Fair Isle. For now, you just stick it in. You should feel a little bit of a kind of click when it goes back, because it will kind of have a little tab that it catches on. Close it. As long as it's free in there, you're good. Now the trick is that I don't have any clothespins. I didn't see any upstairs. It's really hard because the reason I use a clothespin is to weight it down, because otherwise it'll just fly up through there and it's really annoying. I can just hold it for right now, but I will run upstairs after I show you this and see if there used to be a big giant bucket of clothespins and it's missing. So the first one you're going to use this is a needle pusher.